Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session on adding biometrics for your access control system. I hope all of you have been enjoying and finding our session so far useful and thought-provoking. A huge shout out to BioConnect's marketing and digital media team, which really put in a lot of effort in having this event put together. A huge shout out to all of my colleagues. I'm sure that as we are winding down towards the end of the whole event, um, you have had some good amount of information that you can take back, think about, and leverage to the changes that you would like to see within your access control systems to adapt to the new order. That brings us to the current topic of interest. And when we talk about adding biometrics to access control system, I'm sure most of you have already either been using biometrics as a way of controlling the access into your physical or digital domains, and or many of you are seriously contemplating that. In today's session, what I aim to achieve is kind of like give a capsule size summary of everything that we have covered so far in the day, but more from the perspective of biometrics. And particularly look at what is this whole new normal that we keep talking about? How does that look like? What are the key aspects of this? And how does biometrics as a technology fit within this new ecosystem, the changes that are happening? Whether you're considering biometrics as a technology that is going to be used by devices that are mounted on a wall, or whether it is going to be leveraged through the end user's handheld devices, mobile biometrics, what are the factors that we have to keep in mind? And what are the trends that are affecting biometrics as an industry? And what do we see emerging out of this whole pandemic experience? I would also like to spend a few minutes talking about BioConnect platform, where over this year, we have distilled all the key learnings of the trends that we have seen and bake them into our platform solution to ensure that all our key patrons and customers are going to be future proofed for any kind of uncertainty that we can be aware of. And finally, I want to wrap it all up with a few best practices that I feel is going to be key for any access control system that leverages biometrics. So without much further ado, we'll get started with our session. So what is the new normal that we are looking at? COVID has indeed redefined many things for us as a society, but more so from the perspective of technology and industries. The way we have always been looking at security is evolving and evolving rapidly. Particularly, the perimeter of physical security is expanding. Point in consideration here is that typically we always had a mindset that security or physical security would start when a person gains at the point of entry, like gains access and comes at the point of entry, whether it is a door or a cabinet or whatever. But that whole perspective is now going to change because that perimeter of physical security is now expanding. Assessment of the eligibility of an individual, whether the person is the rightful person and is entering under the right conditions, starts much before the user even reaches the point of entry. While we talk about identity as the new security perimeter, because so far the proxy identities of just keys and fobs and cards, we have understood that they are not sufficient enough to establish rightful identity. Physical security is no longer limited only to that right identity. It also adds a new dimension of whether the conditions of that person is right. Physical access control systems, they have to adapt to uncertainty more easily, especially while businesses grapple with newer and newer requirements. When federal regulations are evolving to protect people, enterprises are tasked the with the expectation that not only are physical assets now to be protected, but also the lives of their employees, of people who are entering their location, whether they are visitors, whether they are employees. They are now accountable to ensure that the place is safe, secure, and healthy for all the people present over there. So the physical access control systems should be able to manage these uncertainty without increasing the financial burden on their customers. As we move into a digital first world where we see that businesses are moving away from the traditional brick and mortar system, brick and mortar places, they will have to move towards a changed mindset where data storage, transmission, and processing are also going to become key components. And access to these spaces, whether they are colos, whether they are data centers, cabinets, all of that is going to become essential, because the definition of valuable asset is now changing. It is no longer just the physical assets, it is also the digital domain that will have to be protected around the clock. So, how does all of this influence this whole quest for identity that has defined security and access control? Traditionally, as you know, we have always been talking about how the path to prove oneself traverses through the three aspects of what I know, what I own, and coming into biometrics, the whole attribute of who I am. Traditionally, whether we are using keys, fobs, documents, plastic cards that we carry on us, or whether we are using passwords, pins, all of these served as proxies for our true identity. With biometrics, we established a new level where an individual, a user, an end user can be who he or she is, and therefore, by virtue of who they are gaining access, rightful access to the physical or digital domains. But post COVID, there is a new aspect, a new dimension that is added into this, which is about not only whether the person is the right person and has the right permissions, but also whether the person meets the conditions for entry. How is the person? Is the person wearing a mask? Is the body temperature of the person under the normal threshold, within the normal thresholds? And is the person bearing no symptoms? Can the person declare themselves as being fit? And added to all of this comes the dimensions of compliance and reporting, where the enterprise is now accountable to say that they are tracking these things actively and taking mitigation steps to ensure that the environment is maintained safe, secure, and healthy for everyone. How does all of this then influence biometrics as an industry, given that biometrics as a technology has played a significant role in ensuring security of the assets and the spaces that we operate in. If we look at, and this is based off of a study that was done by Gartner and published early in this year, it remains to be seen how much of a change it is going to see post-pandemic. But definitely the long-term trend that has been observed will still sustain. And to kind of distill this out in as simplified a manner as possible, if we can look at biometrics from the two aspects of behavioral and morphological, where we talk about like the physical traits, such as the hand geometry, face, eye, fingerprints, all of these, the morphological aspects of biometric identification is shifting towards more of an active mode of authentication. Therefore, liveness detection, whenever somebody is employing physical attributes such as face or fingerprint, becomes a key medium through which identity can be established. And if we talk about behavioral attributes, which is more of a learned trait, there the shift in the technology, the trends are moving towards more of a passive way of assessing the behavior of an end user. Typically, when we talk about behavioral modalities, users had to go through a long drawn enrollment process where they had to either continue to type, so that the system could learn their behavior, continue to interact with the screen. All of these are now being moved away to more of a passive aspect of behavior. What are the typical environments in which the user always operates in? How does the user handle the device? Is it in their left hand? Is it in their right hand? All of these subtle aspects, which doesn't require a conscious, an active, engaged involvement where the user is either rotating the face whenever they are trying to enroll the biometric modality. All of that is being simplified when we talk about passive behavioral attributes. Device camera, when we talk about mobile biometrics, device camera is emerging as the preferred medium, the preferred mode of capture. Face is again a widely adapted biometric modality for authentication. And eye biometrics, particularly for mobile authentication, has unfortunately failed to reach mass adoption. This has led to a lot of stagnation in new technology and R&D. And especially given that face modality seems to be more preferred, eye as a component of the face is now kind of combined as a way to ensure liveness of the presentation. And therefore, eye modality in and of itself is now part of your face authentication mechanism. How does all of this then tie into leveraging biometrics for the new normal? Typically, whether you're using biometrics on a device that is mounted on the wall, or you want to use biometrics on the mobile device, traditionally, we had considered certain 7 factors, what are called as desirability factors, to determine which type of modality has to be used. Obviously, if I'm a long-term care home and I'm using biometrics-based access control system for my residences, usage of, let's say, fingerprint may not be appropriate for my demography, whereas face is more suitable. So all of these basic 7 attributes of collectability, performance, acceptability, uniqueness, universality, all of which were being determined to ensure that the right sort of biometric modality can be used, is now going to change and have expanded factors that will be added into this, an expansion of the factors, some of which include, will my system be completely touchless, contactless systems, so that people, whoever is wary about touching surfaces that has already been used or touched by somebody else, can enroll themselves in a safe manner. which brings us to the aspect of like remote enrollment. As we go into a more distributed work environment, a more distributed way of operating, and users would like to have the convenience of operating from wherever they are within their own familiar environments, which doesn't require a user to travel a long distance to go and enroll and have somebody monitor the whole enrollment process. So when we talk about remote enrollment, and that brings us to the aspect of mobile biometrics, we also have to be cognizant of ensuring that the user's enrollment can be done in as seamless manner as possible, ensuring high quality enrollment. Unlike enrollment at a device that is mounted on a wall, which is typically supervised by a person, we are now relying on the end user to make the judgment of how they are going to present their biometric modality and ensure that the capture of the biometric modality and the processing and the generation of the template is all being done at a high quality so that the tied performance of false acceptance, false rejection rates are all completely minimized. You want to ensure that there is convenience as well as security tied together when you're using biometrics, and want to ensure that the end users are able to manage their enrollment and authentication by themselves. Of course, there are newer aspects of identity assurance, such as like declaring your fitness to get into a space, self-declaring that I don't bear any symptoms, reporting on these self-declarations, ensuring that whatever is the personal information that is rightfully or that should rightfully be owned by the end user remains under the control of the end user, especially sensitive information such as your biometric information should always be under the control of the end user. There is also a need to quantify the risk so that when we talk about convenience and security, we are not throttling the experience to such an extent that the usage of biometrics becomes a hassle for the end user. It is about marrying convenience with security in the right manner, and therefore quantifying risk is going to be the underlying foundation on which additional policies can be built, where you can leverage passive behavioral aspects to determine whether the observed pattern is typical for this end user. And if so, then it is of a low risk because we have built sufficient trust in the model to learn the user's behavior and thereby have a more simplified policy of authentication. However, if there are significant deviations from these observed behavior, the risk quantification is going to be much higher, and therefore the user may have to have additional modes of authentication, whether it is using multiple biometrics or meeting certain standards of additional approvals. So all of these aspects are going to govern how biometrics will start being used within the access control systems. And therefore, any access control system that wants to ensure a safe and secure solution for its customers will have to be adaptable, will have to be scalable, and offer a high availability and reliable solution so that any changes to the threat level that we are seeing around us will automatically kick in the relevant authentication and protection mechanisms that is going to ensure that everyone's lives as well as the assets are going to be optimally protected. With BioConnect 5.0, the BCE 5.0 platform, we are achieving this, particularly by ensuring that we are taking biometrics off of the wall and getting it into the hands of the end user through their mobile devices. It ensures that the customers or the end users have the ability to control the way they want their assets, their employees' lives and health to be protected. Whether it is by leveraging integration with multiple MFA vendors, third-party vendors such as Duo, Okta, Ping, or if you want to leverage biometrics and therefore use our own BioConnect mobile authenticator, add in additional layers of detection, whether the user is wearing a mask or whether the user's body temperature is under normal. All of these aspects can now be seamlessly controlled through the BioConnect 5.0 platform. The platform itself, as you may have already seen throughout the sessions in the day, is supporting multiple new devices such as BioConnect's own fingerprint OEM device LR1, which brings with it a Swiss knife level of flexibility, allowing you to implement different modes of authentication, whether you want to use fingerprints, whether you want to use card, whether you want to leverage biometrics on the user's mobile phone, or have wellness declaration as part of a requirement for gaining entry into your physical location. We also support Suprema's FaceStation F2, which is integrated with the thermal camera, so that you have state-of-the-art face recognition, face authentication technology at your fingertips, which allows for contactless solution, and also support a wide array of popular biometric devices from Suprema, such as BS2, BW2, BP2, BLN2, all of which can now be leveraged to go into a completely contactless solution without having to rip and replace your existing hardware. So the key aspect of ensuring that the financial impact of uncertainty on the businesses is as minimal as possible. And with our own BioConnect mobile authenticator, you have the flexibility of adding additional biometric modes of authentication, whether it is going to be face, voice, or device native Touch ID, Face ID. You can leverage passive behavioral attribute and use that in combination with Trust AI, BioConnect's Trust AI, to quantify the risk for a transaction and thereby implement additional policies. The whole the BioConnect mobile app itself is built with the security first approach, respecting the right for the user to forget, to have their data removed from the system. All the PII, personally identifiable information of the user, the biometric templates of the user, which are encrypted, are stored only on the user's device, thereby ensuring that the full control of the user's information rests with the user, and the user can choose to delete all of this whenever they want to get off the system. The solution itself operates both on-prem and on cloud deployments and is available on both iOS and Android platforms, and can adapt to any level of authentication mechanism that you want to implement. Whether you want it to operate as just a typical MFA sort of an authenticator where the user has to just click approve or deny for a transaction, whether the user has to now step up with additional level of security by authenticating themselves. If you want to tie down biometric authentication to wellness declaration so that there is integrity to the health declaration that has been submitted by the end user, that it is not some unidentified person who just submitted a wellness declaration on behalf of somebody else, but it is the rightful submission that has come from the appropriate source. All of this can be customized through the BioConnect mobile authenticator. Here, You will see how the enrollment, and as I said, it supports face, voice, and device ID, as well as there is passive behavioral aspects baked within it. But here you can see a sample enrollment and authentication where the whole enrollment flow you can see takes literally a matter of like just a second to complete. And the authentication also is extremely seamless. Having ability for the user to be given dynamic feedback to ensure that the user is presenting the modality in the right format under the right conditions. If you're enrolling voice, ensuring that there is going to be as silent an environment around you as possible, rejecting poor quality enrollments. All of these are aspects that have to be considered when we are trying to onboard users remotely. Ultimately, BioConnect 5.0 platform or the overall BioConnect solution has been aiming to ensure that there is a right balance of your access control solution with the privacy and security requirements, ensuring that the user can remove all of their data, decoupling, decentralizing the data in such a way that all sensitive information rests on the device, whether it is on-prem or held on the user's phone, and having a separate set of data completely anonymized, which is going to be present in the cloud, ensures that there is going to be appropriate protection mechanism, and thereby compliance rules and regulations are going to be decoupled to have the right amount of impact. Should there be a privacy impact of breach, whether it is a privacy impact of tracking, ensuring that the user's data is never threatened and the user feels safe and secure operating the application and using the application. All of this is going to be paramount when assessing the kind of access control system and the requirements that any credible access control system would have to provide to ensure that they are going to remain relevant and useful in the new world order that we are seeing emerge out of this pandemic experience. Ultimately, if we have to like boil this down to some of the best practices that I feel are important for us to bear in mind, first and foremost, it is important that we give privacy and security its due respect. Privacy has to be paramount, and it is important that we trust the data of the end users with them. Your biometric templates, your PII information should remain in the control of the end user. Future-proofing the physical access control system, whereby you are leveraging the platform solution that helps meet the enterprise requirements without increasing the financial burden, especially as businesses are learning to adopt and adapt to uncertain times. We have to understand that the whole perimeter of security, it is not only about right identity, it is also about the right conditions in which the end user is trying to access the assets, physical or digital. When users are operating in a distributed work environment, which is going to be more and more preferred, remote enrollment and identity management is going to become key. Therefore, ensuring appropriate user experience, UI UX feedbacks, all of that is going to become key. The success of a biometric system, especially a mobile-based biometric system, is no longer something that is only about the technology. It is also about the experience of the technology. It is important that we decentralize identity in order to ensure that privacy and security can be improved. and implementing modular and flexible authentication policies that can be supported and adapted to by your access control systems. These authentication policies can be driven by the threat level to ensure that higher security is implemented when there is a need for it, and therefore ensure that the user convenience as well as user security are both optimally balanced. So with that, I come to the end of my session today. I hope you found this to be thought-provoking and were able to glean some good information about the trends and best practices and how you can leverage biometrics for your access control system. If you have any questions, please feel free to stick around. I'll be more than happy to discuss. If you have any additional thoughts that you feel you would like to share, we'll be happy to take that too. We have one more session that is coming up. I hope you're all going to stick around for that. And thank you. Thank you for your attention. I hope you found this useful. There's a question where with BioConnect Mobile, can you customize wellness questions? Yes. With BioConnect Mobile, you can definitely customize your wellness questions. It is adaptable. So whether you want to have 5 questions, 6 questions, the application adapts itself to present it optimally for the end user. You can totally customize the questions. The biometric templates on BioConnect Mobile, it is stored on the device. It is all encrypted. It is going to be stored on the device. The admin system will only present you with the view of the transaction, whether it succeeded, what did the user use to resolve the step-up request, and if you're going to be leveraging by a behavioral aspect, the quantification of the whole transaction, the risk of the transaction, then on the admin console, you will also be able to see what is the associated risk that was identified with the transaction. The lower the risk value, the more trustworthy the transaction was. The higher the risk value, then the higher the risk associated with it. Where on the phone is the template stored? The template is stored on, so in order to store the templates, we use the device security, whether it is on iOS or on Android. We leverage the the OS system's own storage mechanism for this to ensure that we have the best in grade security around it. It is also encrypted using public-private key pair that is generated through the application. So we are not entirely reliant only on the OS level security. I see there was one more question that came. Can I be notified as an admin when someone fails a step-up request? Yes. Not only this, when someone fails the wellness declaration, you're going to be notified. And how is biometric template on device different from native biometric like Touch ID? Absolutely. That's a very good question. Biometric The native biometric modality, such as Touch ID or Face ID, cannot give you a reliable identity binding. Point in case here is, let's say, Touch ID on iOS, you can enroll up to, I think, 4, 5 fingerprints, I guess. And even with Face ID, for that matter, you can enroll an alternative appearance whereby you can have another face enrollment and it need not belong to you, or any of those 5 fingers can belong to anybody else, right? So there is no identity binding, reliable identity binding that is present when you're using only the native Touch ID or Face ID. Unlike that, with a mobile-based, like a non-native biometric modality, you have a reliable way to ensure that the the biometric modality that was enrolled belonged to the rightful user who was supposed to be enrolled. Cool. I guess we have addressed all the questions. Thank you once again for your time, and I hope you'll stick around for the last session. Have a fantastic day ahead. Thank you for your time.
For more information, visit our website at bioconnect.com.